Welcome to the TriStar Podcast, where martial arts meets family, faith, and personal growth. Join Professor Brummett and Professor Chris Bean as they share stories from the mat, lessons from life, and tools to help you and your family live like black belts on and off the mat. It's time to train the body, sharpen the mind, and strengthen the spirit right here on the TriStar Podcast. Hello, welcome back to the TriStar Podcast. Today, we are stepping into, I think, something pretty special, especially for our school, is the Bible study. And this particular one is on communication. And I think, Mr. Bean and I would agree that communication really is a superpower. And, Scripture has, I think it has some of the sharpest, let's say, clearest ever written guidance on communication. So, we're gonna talk about communication with kids, our spouses, our teammates, our coworkers, people that surround us every single day. So the Bible just doesn't tell us like what to say. It really teaches us how to say it and when to say it, and more importantly, sometimes even when not to say it. So today we're going to break some of those things down with some biblical principles on communication and what it looks like in real life. So welcome back.
Well, and I think it's important for the listeners, you guys know as well, that this is going to be a two-part conversation. So today we're going to do just part one of that, and then next week we'll kind of finish it up and wrap it all together. But I think, like you said, Scripture gives us such a wonderful way to dissect how to live an uprighteous life. And I think communicating is one of those tenets that is so important, because I can have an idea in my head, and you can have an idea in your head, but if we're not able to communicate those ideas across to each other, then that idea is useless, right? It can't help us in any way, shape, or form. So being able to clearly articulate yourself, to communicate the things that you want to get across, is so important across any walk of life. It doesn't matter if you're interacting with your spouse, if you're interacting with your kids or the coworkers at your job. It is so important to be able to clearly communicate those things with everybody that you come in contact with.
And I can't imagine how someone, and forgive me for saying this if this is you, but it's got to be really difficult for someone who can't read the room. You know what I mean? I don't get me wrong. There's been times when I haven't read the room either, but on a daily basis, if you're not able to read the room and the reason, of course, we could go a bunch of different ways talking about communication and how to do those things. And the reason, obviously, that we chose Scripture is because, one, we're starting with the truth, and two, alongside of that, if we're starting with the truth, if the acronym for the Bible is true, and BIBLE, basic instructions before leaving Earth, if our Creator has given us ways to be able to communicate, well, one, obviously, through the Bible, He's communicating with us, so there we are. And He's utilizing Scripture in a way to teach us. So why wouldn't we utilize Scripture to be able to, communicate just like He is one of the ways that He used to communicate with us?
Well, I always think that, the Bible it has been largely unchanged without some slight interpretations of how the text should be written based on whatever standard that you're starting with. But it has been the book that has been the standard book throughout the entire time. And so I think that what that means to me is the way that it is written, it was for the time, yes, but it is also for everybody thereafter that time, for those people that it was written for, because we can still learn key information from the word that was given to us from God and translated across however many different times, so it gets to us when whatever version that is that we have, whatever translation version that is. But it has been done in such a way that is everlasting. It is continual, and it is always, you can almost open the Bible, pick a random page and verse on that page and get something valuable from that, because it's written in such a way that is able to happen. It is not timed itself out, it is everlasting and continual. So I think that is a feather in its cap, of course, to say that how powerful the word is, and how powerful that communication was for the time and for all the time thereafter. So much to be learned from those verses and the parables that were in there. And, we could speak for a handful of parables. You can speak for, years on and still not really understand or grasp what it meant to be there in that time or to get everything from that. So we're going to do our best today to read a verse or two and then talk about how those things relate to communication, at least as we see it, or the ways that we can understand it.
Agreed. So let's, I guess, start with the first one. You want to kick us off?
Absolutely. So our first verse is talking about wisdom before words, and it's Proverbs 18, verse 13. And it is answering before listening, that is folly and shame. So answering before listening. To me, immediately what that tells me is if I'm listening to somebody talk, I'm there while they're talking, but I'm already thinking, okay, as soon as they stop talking, I'm going to say this. And I've shut off the listening part of my head, and I'm not listening anymore. I'm just waiting for that pause for me to be able to insert whatever it is that I said. And when that happens, and it happens, so many times in life, it's hard to, once you start to hear that, then you can start to see yourself doing that continually. Because I know even I do this. It is hard to be able to turn that off and actively listen to what that other person is saying. But when we do that, then the communication is flowing back and forth. It's a give and take, as opposed to somebody being a dictator and just shouting the commands and not listening to what the other people have to say. So being able to listen and then answer. So again, the verse is Proverbs chapter 18, verse 13, answering before listening, that is folly and shame.
It reminds me of, the idea, how many eyes, or excuse me, how many ears did God give you? Two. And how many mouths did he give you? One. So you should listen twice as much as you speak. And I think that's a good philosophy to have. And you're right. Answering before listening starts with, you're already hearing what they're saying, and you've already got your comeback. And generally it's because you want to be right in the conversation. So therefore you want to dominate it. You don't want to be an equal, or you don't want to collaborate inside of the conversation. You're trying to dominate that conversation. And it also reminds me of, and I think every single podcast I bring Zig Ziglar up, but he would say, when somebody has a chip on their shoulder, the best thing you can do for them is let them take a bow. And I liken that to this with regards to, sometimes the best thing you can do is just let somebody talk. Even though you may have the answer, or what you are going to say is going to be superior anyways, go ahead and let them talk. And sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes I find the person that talks the most generally, not in all cases, but generally knows the least.
Yeah.
Would you find that to be true sometimes?
Yeah, sometimes. Or at the very least, that's what they think. They think they know the most. And they just continue talking and talking, not knowing when to stop talking. And I think that goes back to reading the room. But I know for me, I have found myself doing this and having that answer before really listening to that person, because I'll hear the very first phrase of what they're saying, and they'll start into it. And I'm like, okay, they're going to and I play it out in my head, and okay, as soon as they stop, pow. And then I'm doing that. I think I'm doing that because I want to expedite the conversation, get the answer, and then we can move on to whatever is next. But that doesn't help. That doesn't help. And more often that hurts, because I'm not listening to what the conversation is, and I'm already going off in a tangent, and I don't listen, so I don't have that actual answer that they're talking about because I wasn't listening to what they were saying. So I think this is a way to bring up active listening. And really that's kind of, to me, what this verse is talking about.
I couldn't agree more. And I think I've got I don't have my glasses on. So, but if you go back to, so you have verse 18 there, and I'm just picking up the Bible here. Okay, so 18, where you read 18:13, yes. Right? So, okay, so answering before listening, that's folly and shame. But right before it, it talks about, but humility comes before honor. So in verse 12, before the downfall of a man's heart is proud, but humility comes before honor. So, like, the funny thing is we want to speak so that we're honored, that we're being heard, so that we know that we're right. But really that humility comes before being honored, meaning you have to be humble enough to listen first, maybe talk second if it's appropriate, but slow down and seek to understand before, you're trying to be understood. Does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely does. Yeah. And I think that this reminds me of what it means to bow, which is I give respect and I get respect.
I get respect.
And to me, these things are connected, because I have to be able to show that I'm respectful enough to listen to whatever it is that you have to say. Actually listen to what you have to say. Wait, let my brain do some things and then say the things, as opposed to listen to two words that you say, come up with the answer, and then say it as soon as there's a pause in the conversation, which is not right. So again, to me, this is I give respect, I get respect, and that's a way to connect that, at least for me.
Yeah, I think one way too that we utilize this in the studio is, so if you think about, we teach focus before movement. And so, like, speed without awareness creates mistakes. And so when we open our mouth and just blurt things out without listening to the whole thing, we're going to make mistakes. And, in scripture, God teaches us to listen before we speak. And that's why, like I said in the studio, we teach focus before movement, because if we can get the focus where it needs to be, then obviously teaching the movement is going to be so much easier. But when we're trying to overstep that focus, give the answer to the movement, like, no, let's slow it down. Let's get the focus in first. So for us in the speech, like, the wisdom for this is we need to focus on what they're saying before we give our movement, if you will, is kind of where I'm drawing these two parallels.
Well, and it's interesting you say that too, because the focus before movement, and we say the Korean terminology for these things, but every time before we do the form, a form, whatever the form is, we call off whatever the form name is, so everybody knows what's going to happen. We say Shisan and then Sija. Well, Shisan means to focus. Everybody says to look. Okay, yeah, technically you are looking to whatever direction you're going to do that form to, but it actually is focus. And so focus before movement is exactly the thing that we do every time before we do the form. It's the focus and then go. And I think the other thing that does is reminds us to listen to what they have to say, actually dissect what they're saying, and then and focus on what they're saying. Have a thoughtful reply or answer or helpful side of it, or an understanding of whatever it is that they are going through, before you use your mouth to be able to go and do whatever the next step is for that conversation.
Well, and I can remember numerous times, so I can't give you a specific, but I will ask the instructors, I saw that you did this. Why did you do this? So I noticed this happened. What were you thinking? And, or why did you do it? And then I sit back and I listen to what they say, because maybe not what they did was necessarily wrong, but I would have done it differently. But I also need to see and hear and understand the framework that they're working in, because they don't see 365 degrees of the whole studio like I do. And they're not privy to some conversations, like even conversations that we have. So they're limited on what they see. But I first have to get from their point of view what's happening, why they chose to do something one way. And then I can say to them, and I've said this numerous times, okay, I get why you chose that solution and why you did it this way. Let me share this with you. And then I'll open a new door to a room that they've never been in before. Of course, this is proverbial, but a new door to a new room. And then they go, oh, I've never been in this room before. Now they have a different perspective. And then I can say, now, based upon the information that I just gave you, would you still go with that choice, or would it be something different? Oh, and you're smirking because have I done that to you before?
Yes, a number of times.
Yeah.
And that same type of concept could be had in a conversation with a parent and a kid. And here's how I mean. So the parent asked the kid, "Hey, why did you do this?" Or, "Hey, were you the one who did this?" And then you ask the question, and then you wait. And they'll have an answer, and most of the time it'll be an answer right away, because no, it wasn't me, it was them. They, whatever it is. And then you just wait. You don't say anything. You just wait. And what then happens is that gives them an opportunity to actually register what it is that you said. And then after a little bit of time, they'll give you perhaps the right answer, the truthful answer. But that is, a similar type of tactic could be used as a parent having a conversation with a kid. That pause in the conversation, that waiting, that you ask the question and then you just wait to hear the answer, is a very powerful tool that, again, a parent can use with the kid. And you just wait, right? You just wait. Just let them talk, okay? And then just after they say whatever it is they say, especially if it's immediate, because then they're answering without actually thinking about it. And then you wait. Just look at them. Let the gravity of whatever it is hang. And then they'll keep talking. And I think that is a very powerful tool. You can use it with the parents. Or parents can use it with the kids. The bosses or managers can use it with the employees, because that type of communication tactic works so well in those areas.
I couldn't agree more. And the other thing that's happening for the parent when they're doing that is, if you're asking the right questions and allowing space for them to answer, you're going to help guide them to the answer, as opposed to giving them the answer, number one, or two, just making it because I said so. And we don't want that, because what you don't want, and maybe I've said this on the podcast before, but I've definitely said it to parents, is what we don't want is, we don't want obedience because I said so. We want obedience because they have gained emotional intelligence and understanding on how to work through problem solving and coming up with the solutions. Because otherwise, what's going to happen? Your kid's going to become 18 years old, and all they're going to do is look for someone else to plug their umbilical cord into. Somebody else that's going to tell them what to do and how to do it, as opposed to them coming up with the answers themselves, or being able to ask the right questions to the right people to help them come up with the answers. And so noticing, just asking the question, like you said, I noticed something happened here, or you did this. I wonder what you were thinking about. Can you tell me? And if we don't do that, what we're doing is we're setting up arguments based upon assumptions. So if you already have what your answer is going to be before you even understand what they're trying to say, you're already setting up these arguments based upon the assumptions, and there's no clarity. All you have is conflict. And that's not even the right avenue that you want to go down.
Well, I think that when you have an answer before they finish speaking, and you're just waiting for that pause to insert that answer, then you are not talking about the same things, right? One person in the conversation is talking about one thing, and the other person is talking about something else, and they're not, like you said, they don't have clarification on those things, and then the fight happens, or continues to happen, or blows up, because you are arguing about two different things, and you're not coming to an understanding of each other. So when you are in that type of element, yes, listen, actually actively listen to what they're saying, like parse through all of the things, think about it, and then the response that I'm gonna suggest that you give is a question, or even something like, so what I think you're saying is, and then reiterate what they're saying. And then what that means is you're asking the question, but you're also seeking clarification. And when you ask the question, it does something to the dynamics of the conversation. And maybe that's something we can talk about later. But when you ask the question, it changes the dynamics of the conversation. But also, when you ask the question and then you reply back to what they said when you apply back to what they said with what they said in your own words, as if you are understanding them, and then you just ask, am I understanding you correctly? Then you're seeking clarification. Then the grounds of that argument can be both on stable ground, because both parties are able to understand, okay, this is actually the key topic at hand. Now let's move to the next step, which is, how do we solve whatever that key topic is? But once both parties understand, okay, this is the where I stand on this. This is where they stand on this. Now we can move to the next part. And that all is built on that clarification question to understand it is what it is that they said.
Yeah. Close your mouth, open your ears, and then ask a good question to make sure that you understand what they're saying.
So do you want to move into the next verse here?
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Speaking with grace and seasoning. So the verse that we chose to do this with was Colossians 4:6. So let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer one another.
And grace and salt are interesting to counterplay with each other. And grace essentially means compassion and kindness. And salt, you can take it to mean truth, clarity, and flavor of the conversation, which is an interesting kind of counterplay between grace and salt as they relate in that verse.
Yeah, and the neat thing is they are intertwined. They need to be, both presented, because it just can't be grace without salt, and it cannot be salt without grace. They both matter. They actually balance, I think. They balance between truth and kindness. Again, kindness being the grace, truth being the salt. And so, I think, and you're in the, I've done past this, but we work with kids all the time, but you're in the mix with the kids, right? So with your own kids is what I'm mostly speaking about. But kids, I don't necessarily think that they rebel against truth in as much as they rebel against tone. It's really hard to, I think, rebel against truth, because truth is truth. You can deliberately decide to go, yeah, I don't believe that truth. But most kids, they're not self-aware enough to make that distinction, because really they do think black or white, right or wrong. There are no gray areas when you're 2 to 7, let's say, because Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, Tooth Fairy, like they're all there, right? So kids don't rebel against truth; they rebel against the tone. And so when you're delivering that truth to them, I really believe that your tone has to be seasoned with salt, but it has to be delivered with grace.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with that balance, because communication isn't just about being soft, because if our communication is soft, then we are soft. And that means that for lack of a better phrasing, it turns us into a doormat. We don't want to be a doormat. No. Somebody that doesn't have the opportunity to speak up for themselves when they need to, then that turns them into a wishy-washy. They can go either way on anything, because they don't have a way to stand up for themselves. So I think that with communication, we need to be able to clarify what we're saying, take a stance one way or the other, but we have to do it in such a way that is a little bit soft, to have compassion for the people that we're talking about. But we also have to be able to stand firm on whatever it is. And you talk about with the kids. With the kids, yes, you have to have an understanding that they are going to continue to ask questions and try to push the boundary of where that line is for themselves. And if we were only ever knocking them back, if we're only ever pointing out the flaws, then not only are they going to cease to do the flaws, but they're going to cease to do the right things. And as the parent, what we need to do is be able to have a balance between those things. We need to be able to point out, yes, hey, you did an awesome job at this. I'm so proud of you. But we have to have another side of that where it's, hey, that's not right. You can't do that right now, or no, under whatever the circumstances are. So, and it's tough. It's tough because I think that the parents want to be friendly with their kids, and I think that a parent and child relationship is a parent and child relationship, not a friend and friend relationship, because friend and friend relationship is on the same, they're peers. But when you're a parent and a child, there's somebody that is over the other person, and there needs, as a parent, we need to be over the kids, at least for a number of years, because we need to be able to allow them to do the right things the right way. And if we're friendly with them, if we only have just the grace, then we're not going to ever have the other balanced part of that. And like you said, then the kids grow up and they're looking for other people to tell them what to do. And after they turn 18, the police are going to be telling them what to do if they weren't told what to do otherwise. And so that's where that discipline comes in. And maybe that's a harsh way to say that, but I really believe that. And I even see this, and I'm sorry for the teachers, but I even see this in the schools, because I see the school teachers say, all right, friends, let's line up. And it's all friends, which to me is, again, that listen, I like my students. I enjoy spending time with the students that I have. I enjoy spending time with my kids, and I can be friendly with them, but we are not friends, neither me and my kids, nor me and the students, because I am the teacher and I have to remain in that role, because otherwise I step down and then we're peers, and then who has the control there? I mean, not that it's all about control, but I think that across at least up to a certain age, I think that the control is important. And if you relinquish the control by being friends or too friendly or only have the grace without the salt, then that gets diluted at the very best. Sorry if that's too much.
No, because you went exactly where I was going to go anyways. Because we every year we get to work with the Head Start program in Kankakee, and of course we have field trips where schools bring in their kids into the, teachers bus them in and everything for our martial arts field trips. And I remember the first year that I heard, all right, friends, line up. And I looked at one of the teachers, I go, friends? She goes, yeah, we got to say this. And I go, you're not their friend. She goes, I know. And now, listen, I just got done with the Pregler program this year. And I had a couple students say to me, bro, because that's the saying, right? That's going on. I go, you mean yes, sir? And like, yes, sir. Like, what's this? What's this bro stuff? Like, that ain't happening. So there has to be those boundaries. There has to be truth. There has to, and to your point, there has to be someone in charge. And it's not to say that the person in charge doesn't move alongside and help, because they do. But they do have to be above that person. No, in order to bring someone up, where do you have to be?
You have to be above them. You have to pull them.
You have to, yes. And it doesn't mean that you don't come down sometimes and go alongside them and say, hey, I notice this is hard for you. I wonder what might help. Right. Or rather than just saying, stop it right now, or like, look, do I think that some phraseology, so being like totally direct, yeah, my kid runs out in the street and say, get out of the street, that's different, but if they spilt the milk, like I can't yell at them for spilling milk. Even if it's their 12th time, now I might have a different question at that time, going, man, you know what, I see it, it's hard for you to hold on to that glass. What can we do so this doesn't happen anymore? I mean, first we got to clean it up, but now what can we do so this doesn't happen anymore? And help them, let them come up with an idea. Maybe they need a sippy cup because they haven't graduated. And of course, if they're 12, that's a different story. But you see what I'm saying? Like, but you gotta mix that truth, but you have to have, or excuse me, that compassion with that truth. You just have to have it. And if you think about Jesus with the woman at the well, because that woman had multiple husbands and he called her out. But he did it in a way that was compassionate, so much so that she was like, she ran back to everybody going, hey, look, this dude, this bro, right? He told me everything about me and he's right. And like, everybody already knew. Everybody in the town already knew what this woman was and what she had been doing anyways. But now she's like, okay, saying, yeah, that's me. I'm that type of person. And this bro, right, Jesus, he told me all about myself and what I did. So he mixed this compassion with this truth, but he didn't pull any punches either. And I think, grace and salt can be wrapped together if done correctly.
But I think the other thing that happens is if it can be done correctly, then you start to move into a leadership type of role, right? Mm-hmm. And really, as the teacher, as the parent, we are the leaders. right? We need to set the example, but we also need to have standards. And if we don't have the standards, then where are the kids going to be at? Whether you're the teacher or the parent, if you don't have the standards, then where are the kids going to be at? And moreover than that, if you have the standards but you never enforce them, then why have the standards? And I think that really it allows you to, again, to be a leader. And by leading, you have to be compassionate for the people you're leading, but you also have to tell them when they don't do it correctly, because otherwise they don't know any better. And you can't just be friendly with the people that you are leading, because then you are a peer with them, and that doesn't work in a leader type of role.
And it doesn't do them justice. Those that you are leading, whether it's a coworker that you're leading, whether it's your kids, you don't do them justice, because you're not allowing them to see how it is, or what it's supposed to be like to lead someone, and then they won't have that example, and they're deficient now because we've not led them in the right direction. And I just, any parent, and I want to just kind of draw this out, any parent that's struggling with this, what I would say is, kind of go back and look at your tone and how you're delivering your tone. It's okay to take a pause before you rebuttal on things. It's okay to think about it. It's even okay, depending on the situation, to say, you know what, I need some time to think about this, and then we're going to discuss it. That sometimes is the worst for kids, because they're like thinking, oh, especially if you are someone that actually follows through, they're like, uh-oh, this is really bad. And I'll leave you with this before we move to the next thing. And I think I brought this up in another podcast. I don't know. But I remember a run-in with our youngest son, Keegan. He was home. This was in college. He's home for college. So he's 18, 19 years old, whatever it was. It was, I think, his first semester in between his freshman year. So he might have been 17, because he started college when he was 18, I think. Anyways, he had a month off. He's in his bedroom. My wife yells up about, hey, you didn't do X, Y, or Z. Well, I'm in the bedroom that's, next to him, and I heard no response. So I walk over. I said, did you hear your mom? And he goes, yeah. And I said something like, well, I don't remember what I said. I said, well, you need to go do what she said, or whatever I said. And all I remember him saying was, this has nothing to do with you. And I thought, boy, man, I want to rip you out of that bed. Like I wanted to rip him up out of that bed and grab him. And so I stopped. I grabbed my composure, and I looked at him, and I just said, you know what, Keegan, I just want you to know how proud of you I am. Because this situation could have happened well back when you were 12 or 13 years of age. But now look at you. It didn't happen until you're 18 that you think that you can talk to me like that. I said, so for that, I'm quite grateful. But we've got a problem that needs to be addressed here. Now, you have an opportunity to address it, or I will address it. So how do you want to handle this? And then I let it go. Like, I walked away. He got up and did what he needed to do. But also he knew that I would step in. And so I don't know if that's grace and salt together, but to me it is.
Well, I think so. I absolutely think so. And it kind of goes back to listening and then thinking about what you're going to say before you. So that's kind of a connection between both of them, the ones that we've talked about so far.
Excellent. Well, we want to hop into the next section, and before we cut loose and because I don't want to run over and then okay. All right.
Yeah, let's do it. So next one is control the tongue and control the direction. This is James chapter 3, verse 4 and 5. And here it is. The tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider that a forest is set on fire from a small spark. And I think that connection, the spark that can start a fire, a forest fire, huge fire, just by a small spark, and the tongue being the connection to speaking, and the words that we use and how we use those words. The tongue is such a small part of our body, but it can make such a big change over the outcome of whatever the situation is. And so with this, James is basically saying that the tongue is like the steering wheel of your life, and the way that you connect different things, the way that you are having those conversations with people really is so important, because the small match, the spark can burn down a house, it can burn down a fire, but it's so small. The tongue is the same way. So that connection there, I think, is profound.
Yeah, and to even kind of tag onto that, not just your life, but how it affects other people's lives as well, because a kind word can do great things to someone, and a discouraging word, that's meant to be discouraging. So that's different if somebody takes something out of context, because we all do that from time to time as well, because sometimes somebody will say something and it wasn't meant to bring them down, right? So, but if it was meant to tear down or to burn them, to your point, that is a horrible thing, because it can be destructive. So life and death is in the tongue, and I think Scripture talks about the fact that it's sharp. Right? It's sharp, and it can cut, it can leave wounds. It's not like sticks and stones that are actually physical, but they do leave bumps and bruises, and sometimes cuts that are very, very deep.
Well, is it Ephesians, the armor of God, where we take up the Scripture, which is the sword of the Spirit? Is that correct, or is it the shield? Have I got that wrong?
No. It's a sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. So that, exactly. Yep.
And I think as somebody who is in charge, we talked about being a leader, we have the opportunity to build people up or to break them down. And the words that we say, the phrases that we choose to use, if we are able to stop and think about what we say before we say it, going back to the first conversation that we had here today, if we're able to do that, then we can choose our words wisely. And that's a phrase that's been out there for a long, long time now. Choose your words wisely. And I think that choosing your words wisely, and the pin is mightier than the sword, I think it kind of can connect here, because the way that we speak to somebody, the words that we choose to use, which means that we have to be aware enough to choose the words that we use, and we have to be tactful in our approach. We have to have grace with the salt, right? We're just compounding and building on the things we've talked about. If we can do those things correctly, then we can use our words to steer the ship into the right direction and to build people up and not to break those people down. And if we can do that as the parent, if we can do that as the teacher, if we can do that as the leader, then how much more likely are the people who are following us going to be following us? Because then they're going to be following us for our character, not for the position that we hold. And I think that is wild in the realm of leadership as it relates to today, because those kind of things don't necessarily happen. Most of the time now, you're going to respect me because I have a job I've been here for longer than you, or I get paid more than you, whatever that is. But that's the type of leader that we have now, which is far different than the type of leadership or the type of parenting, the type of teacher that we're talking about here.
I couldn't agree more. I've always said for years, I want my students to respect me for my personality, not my position. And I in saying that over and over again for years, I now have a much more profound understanding of what that actually means. Although I did mean it when I said it, but now after this many years of teaching, students and working with people, and it just has a much more profound meaning. And again, I keep bringing Zig Ziglar up, but it's just so true. Where he says that we can't tailor make our situations in life, but we can tailor make our responses to situations in life. And so when you find a phrase that works well, continue to use it. I often have some people that have heard me, teach, even my wife, that I say the same things over and over and over again. Well, why do I say them? Because they have a lasting impact. When somebody says, I can't do that, well, there is no such thing as I can't. It's either I won't or I don't know how. So which is it? You won't do it, or you don't know how to do it. And look, the tone that's set in also makes a difference as well, because I could say, there is no such thing as I can't. It's either I want or I don't know how. Now, which is it? So I said the exact same phrase, I repeated the same words, but I did not say the same phrase, if that makes sense. The meaning behind both of those are different. And so when you're utilizing your tongue, it is not just what you say, it's also how you say it. But don't feel bad about swiping and deploying what other people are saying and utilize it. And that's what we teach parents all the time. We say, look, you hear something out on the floor, repeat it, utilize it at home. What is that Mr. Bean says? Or what is that Mr. Brummett says? Oh, yeah, Mr. Brummett says, when a task is once begun, you leave it not until it's done, and be a matter great or small. You do it well or not at all. So if we're going to start this, we need to finish it, right? Okay, and if we're going to finish it, shouldn't we finish it to the best that we can do? Yeah, all right, let's do it together. Like, those type of things. But notice all of those were just questions. But you're utilizing the core teaching phrases that we say, and I think, and of course I'm biased, but I think those are super powerful.
Well, I think the other part is you talked about being that type of leader that you're respected for who you are, not the position that you have. I think that, and you talked about as time goes on, that is more impactful, more meaningful to you as time goes. I think that one of my outside look at that is, because over time, you come in contact with more and more people. So then it is like a compounding effect, so that the more time you spend in that role, being respected for who you are, not the position that you have, the more meaningful it is to you, because the more impact it's had over the time. And I think, to me, what that means is you understand that words stick. Your encouragement can echo for many years past when that time is that you say it. And sometimes, if we're not careful with our words, a careless insult or a careless correction that isn't done in the correct way can also echo for decades and have a much different impact over that person. And I think that communication is leadership. And the way those things connect is echoed in every way, or every word that a leader says, every conversation that they have, every interaction that they have. So communication is leadership in like a miniature type of form. And every word that person says as a leader, every word we say as a parent, right? And we've talked about this previously, but we know that the words that we say to our kids between the ages of 0, okay, maybe not 0, 1 and 7, 8, somewhere around in there, has way lasting impact. And so much so they don't even know, but that's who they are as an adult. That's how they show up. And if we're not careful with our words, then that can be out of balance real quickly. And maybe it was an offhanded thing. It didn't happen all the time, but we need to continually to check ourselves and be aware of it, what it is that we're saying. Listen to what it is that's happening before we respond with grace and salt if needed. But we have to be careful not to have that out of balance, because otherwise too much salt, that can have a lasting impact. And the more time that you are in that role, I think the more impact that has because of the time.
Yeah, I agree. And look, parents, if you blew up, if you made a mistake, apologize. It's okay to do that. I've apologized to my kids before, asked them to forgive me for X, Y, or Z. And that was a thing in our household, is that, it wasn't, hey, I'm sorry. It was, will you forgive me for, and I had to label, or they did when they, me too, when I was asking my kids to forgive me, will you forgive me for doing X, Y, and Z? I didn't mean to do it this way. And so give yourself some grace, but also show up to your kids and ask for their forgiveness if you feel like you need to. It is not a weakness. It really is not. I think it's really a superpower, to be quite honest with you.
Well, and I think if you can do that with the forethought, so asking for forgiveness, I think is wonderful, because that changes it repositions how that is in their head, right? You're not just saying sorry, but you're asking for forgiveness. And I think that is a step or 2, 3, 4 beyond just saying, I'm sorry for what happened. Will you forgive me for what happened? And then once it's forgiven, then it's like it's wiped away. Not that it didn't happen, but it's wiped away. Then you can start to rebuild. But saying sorry that it happened doesn't mean that There's a difference in that phrasing. I think that is very important. But
Well, it doesn't take ownership.
it doesn't take that. That's yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. Just as like, yeah, I'm sorry it happened, but you're not taking ownership.
No,
for
I'm sorry. I'm sorry
happened.
I got caught. I'm sorry I got caught. That's what that is. It's not taking ownership. It's just I'm sorry I got caught.
Yeah, right. And then taking ownership of it, asking for forgiveness, it changes that. And the next thing that I was going to say is that as a parent, if we can imagine our kids as adults, right? I know that's already challenging enough to do and somewhat scary a little bit, but if you can imagine your kid as an adult, imagine when they're in similar situations, when they have a decision to make, when they have an opportunity to step out on their own to do whatever that thing is. It's kind of like they have a boardroom in their head. And at that boardroom, there's a seat at the table, many seats at the table. The kid, the child that we're talking about should be at the head of the table, the CEO, kind of in charge of the conversation. But oftentimes there are people that are in those seats as the parent, maybe that one time or two times that you blew up and you didn't ask for forgiveness afterwards. It's the teacher that stepped on them every time they got out of line. It's the coach that always said all the negative things. It's those people that are going to be at the table, at that boardroom inside their head. So when they go out to step onto the stage to do something on their own, it's going to be those people that are pointing out those same type of flaws. But if you can imagine that and think, okay, that's not at all where I want my kid to be at. How do I craft that differently? Then you have to be the person that brings the light in those situations. And you have to do it in such a way that you are the light, you have a standard, but you also give them an opportunity to think about things on their own, teach them these type of things that we're talking about, to think for themselves before they come up with an answer, to have some grace and salt, like all of the things we've talked about, even in this small conversation here so far, but to lead them in such a way that they are able to do things kind of on their own, so that when they go to step on the stage for themselves, either they can quiet those voices in their head, or the seats of those at that table is replaced by people that are their biggest cheerleaders as opposed to their biggest distractors.
Yes. Yeah. And look, we're not looking to create obedient kids. That's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to create resilient adults. And the way that we do that is kind of like the three pillars or sections or whatever you want to talk about that we've already kind of discussed, is the wisdom before words. So listen before you speak. Mixing that speech or that speak when you talk with grace and seasoning, and making sure that the tone and the delivering of that spark, which is your tongue, is delivered in a way that is creating the adult that God wants your child to be, not the obedient kid that you think you need right now. And I get it. I've been where you're at. Now, not exactly. My situation was a little bit different because when I got married, my wife already had 2 kids. So we had like a 12-year-old, a 6-year-old, and then a little bit later we had Keegan come along. So I'm spread out. I didn't have for you have all the kids, all the chaos at once. My chaos was a little bit different because, I'm trying to interact with a teenager and an adolescent and then a baby. So that was a little bit different. But the concepts that we just talked about in this specific podcast is so true. And I just want to encourage the parents to know that, look, if you're struggling, then that means you care and that you're doing a good job. Does that mean that you could make some course corrections and I don't want to say do a better job, because that's saying like you're not doing a good job, but serve your child even more to help create them to become a resilient adult? Yeah, we can do that. And we can do that by starting with, those 3 pillars that we kind of talked about right yet today.
Well, I think we have time. Can we do one more before we end this one for today?
Sure.
Let's do one more.
Sir.
So this one, last one here for today, before we get to some really heavy hitters for next week. But this last one is the power of a gentle response. And the verse that we're pulling from is Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And to me, I think that goes back with the grace and salt. And so we have to be compassionate in our speech. There has to be a little bit of salt that's in there, but that also goes back to where you talked about reading the room, and we need to be able to read the room, read the conversation, read the person that we're talking with, and know a little bit before we just spew out whatever it is. And this one, I think, is probably one of the harder verses, at least of what we've talked about so far here today, to put into action, to live out, especially when you are conversationally battling with somebody, if it is an argument, and having that compassion to have grace in that response, or that gentle answer as it is in that conversation, especially when somebody's coming at you full force, is very difficult to do, I think, in practice.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, verbal and emotional aikido, right? We redirect things. We don't, collide with them. We come up with kind of soft counters to overcome that brute force. So like if you think about maybe your child's throwing a fit, something went wrong or whatever, right? And like you could I'm just going to use this as a phrase, but you could say, man, I see some big feelings right now. I wonder what your body needs. And then let them verbalize it. I want the ice cream or whatever, and then you can start to, deal with what it's the ice cream, you didn't give me the ice, like whatever it is, but then you can start that conversation and go down that path. But I think more and more, I think asking the right questions is so huge. And to use Jesus as the example, I mean, Jesus was the perfect question asker, if you will, because most of his answers were questions. When he was asked a question, he always, mostly always, answered a question with a question. And here's what's powerful about that. Our minds are set up in such a way that when it's asked a question, it can't help but to try to come up with an answer. Think about that for a second. When somebody gives you a question, your mind, okay, look, for all you males out there, because you're always trying to solve problems anyways. So when somebody gives you a question, you're a heavy hitter trying to solve that problem and come up with it. And I've never been a female, but I know still, though, that the mind, when it's asked questions, tries to come up with answers. And so if in your gentle response, if you can do that emotional and verbal aikido and kind of redirect, don't collide right into it, but redirect and do some sort of, like I said, soft counter to that brute force, ask some questions that can help that person get to the right answer. Because I will tell you, and I've done this with students, where I sometimes they'll do something and I'll go, and again, this isn't an argument, but I'll just say, that didn't look like that felt right. Did that feel right? And like, no, that didn't feel right. All right. Well, what do you think we need to do to correct that then? I don't know. I said, okay. Do you mind if I give you what I see? And they say, yeah. Well, look, you're not stepping over far enough to do that spin kick. And by stepping shallow, that's what's throwing you off balance. So if you step over far enough, and then I jokingly say this because this happens almost every single time. They step over far enough, they nail the pad or whatever, and then I go, man, you would think I know what I'm talking about, And then they kind of chuckle, and I chuckle too. But and I say that as a joke, even though it is true in that frame. But what I do is I just ask the questions and I slow things down so that they can process it. I think sometimes we expect our kids to give us an answer right away or to do it immediately. And I'm here to tell you, ages, look, 3, 4, 5, even 6 years old, they're looking to, they have a hard time coming up with the answer sometimes. And so you have to ask the question and leave space. And it's every time I do that on the floor, sometimes I have parents that get kind of antsy, like they want to answer for their kids, and I see it. And sometimes the parents will say things, and then I'll walk over when the drill's going on or whatever, and I'll say, hey, parents, I just want you to understand what I'm doing here. Sometimes there's this there's this lull where there's this pause where I let your kid process what the answer is that they're going to give. Wrong or right, doesn't matter to me. I need them to come up with their answer so that I can help direct them. And then I just tell the parents, I go, if we don't do that, they're going to be looking for the next person to plug their umbilical cord in. And it may not be the person you want it to be. So it's going to be uncomfortable. I know you're going to want to answer the question for them. Don't do it. Let them just sit in that stew for a little while and kind of simmer. Because, man, when they do, they're going to come out tasting really good because they're going to come up with those answers. And when they do come up with the answers, they have that, to them, it feels like an aha moment. They're like, oh, and then they connect it. So I'll give you, for instance, they do that spin kick and I make that comment, how did that feel? I didn't feel right. Okay. We go through that whole thing and then they do it. As soon as they nail it, I go, how did that feel? And they go, that felt good. And reason I want them to feel that and state it is because I want them to connect that feeling to the right movement. That's the same thing we need to do when we're giving, we give that gentle response. And then when they come up with the answer, all right, great. So next time we're going to do it this way. Yeah. Okay. And then when it happens and they do it the way that they said they were going to do it, go back to that and go, man, how did that feel? Or what did you think of that? And remind them of that success. I'm sorry, I keep going, but.
Well, okay. So you talked about a couple things there, and I just want to touch on two things in particular because they really stood out to me. And as it relates to this verse, I think that de-escalation is the word that it does, but because by responding, by slowing things down, by asking a question, bringing the heat level down a little bit, then it helps to de-escalate that situation, especially when it's a frustrating time or the argument is mid-battle. Slow down a little bit, ask the question, seek to understand first. And I think that is key, right? And de-escalating a conversation is definitely a tip, a tactic, a tool that I think everybody should know, especially parents, to de-escalate situations, especially with their kids. And you talked about with males mostly trying to figure things out. And as a husband, let me give you a husband to husband tip, and maybe this isn't just for you, but to listeners. When I'm listening to my wife and she's listing off some things that happen, I will sometimes ask beforehand or sometimes before I give an answer. I say, right now, do you need me just to listen to all the things that you have, to whatever it is that's going on, or would you like me to come up with some sort of answers or to try to solve this? Because as a male, like you said, we are always trying to solve the problem, where that is frequently not what our wives need in those situations. So being able to ask that question, and the first couple times you do it, it's going to be very clumsy, and she's going to think that you're but listen, have that conversation maybe outside of the time when it's actually happening, and then put it into action the next time it does happen, so that you can have that conversation and she can get what she needs, and then you know that you are there to listen and you're in a listening role and not in you don't have your problem solving hat on, and you can take that hat off and put the listening hat on, because that being able to step into the right role in those times, I think will help to save you a lot of potential arguments later on. And I think that's a very good tip. And I wish I could share where that came from. I don't quite remember, but it's a very good tip to have. Absolutely.
I don't disagree. And you can do the same thing with your kids, not actually ask that unless they're older, you know what I mean? But you can decide, have some discernment on whether this is something that needs to be solved right now, or this can be a conversation for later. Because sometimes it could be, like, I see big feelings right now. I wonder what your body needs. And then just let it sit. And then you could even, especially if the tantrum's done because you addressed that part, like you could walk away and then come back and say, did you figure out what your body needs? Like, not everything has to be solved right now. Again, if they're running into the street, it's got to be solved right now. But this reminds me so much, and I haven't even told you this, so I'm just going to say it now. I'm coming out with another book. It's called 10,000 Conversations. And the premise of the whole book is the fact that it's not one or two conversations that ever solve the problems with your kids. It's not one or two conversations that ever motivate them. It's not one or two conversations that get them where they need to go. It's 10,000 conversations. And it's funny that you didn't even okay, so you came up with this topic that we were going to do today, had no idea about what I'm doing. And so, yeah, that's just kind of funny that as we're going through this, because I'm actually going through, putting the book together now, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and so I'm thinking, man, I might intermix some of the stuff that we talked about today into this too. So, yeah.
Very good. I think this is a good stopping point, because next week I think we got some really heavy hitter verses and conversations that we're going to have about this. But listeners, as you are listening to this, I just wonder, what were your favorite verses that we talked about here today? So if you can leave us a comment on Facebook, actually, let me ask, Mr. Brumman, is there a best place for them to leave us a comment to tell us what the best verse or their favorite verse that we talked about today was?
It could be no, not really. I mean, look, okay. The best thing to do would be to, leave us a review and a comment, on either Spotify or iTunes. Those are huge. You could go to YouTube and leave us your best verse on YouTube. We always do a blog post, every Wednesday with regards to that. I'm just trying to think, like the algorithm wise, what that would be most effective, but I don't know, heck, you could even message us through the app if that's easier for you. But the problem with doing that is there might not be any context. So, you know what I mean? Yes. Somebody might message us a verse and we go, okay, what is this? That type of thing.
Yes. So I guess wherever you're listening to this at, one of the verses that's most spoke to you, was most prevalent for you or most impactful for you, let us know what that is, because I'd be very curious to know. And again, next week, we got some very heavy hitters, because we haven't yet done any verses where Jesus spoke. And so next week, we save those for next week. So come back for that, and we'll have a wonderful conversation on communication and the best example, perfect example that we've had to learn from, as it is from Jesus. Thanks for joining the TriStar podcast, where black belts begin at home. Connect with our community by visiting tristarkarate.com. Follow us on social media and share this episode with a family who's ready to grow stronger together. Until next time, stay focused, stay faithful, and keep training like a champion.